Hello everyone, it's me, and welcome back to another episode of my Smite SMP series. If you watched episode 1, then you already know how this journey started. I joined the server, built my first base, started collecting resources, learned how to make money, explored different places, and somehow ended up traveling through the Nether and even the end. And now we're finally here for episode 2. Before we start, I just want to say thank you to everyone who watched the first episode. And if you're new here, welcome. If you enjoy Minecraft, Smite SMP, survival, building, exploring, and just watching me try to become richer on the server, then consider subscribing. It really helps me a lot, and it also helps me know that people are enjoying these videos. So, let's get into episode 2. When I started this episode, I went back to my home and started thinking about what I should do next. My base was already starting to look better than when I first joined, but I knew there was still a lot that I could improve. I also had some resources that I had collected during episode 1, and one of the things I wanted to work on was my farming area. So I went into my storage and took out my cocoa beans. I had already discovered cocoa beans during my previous adventure, and now I wanted to do something more useful with them. Instead of just keeping them inside my storage, I decided to actually expand my cocoa bean farm. I started placing the cocoa beans around the jungle logs that I had collected. At first, I wasn't completely sure about the best way to place them. But then I realized something important. Cocoa beans can actually be placed on different sides of jungle logs, which means you don't have to use only one side of the tree. That gave me a much better idea for my farm. I started placing the cocoa beans around the jungle logs, using multiple sides of the logs to make better use of the space. Instead of having cocoa beans on just one side, I could use the other sides as well. I started working around the jungle trees and placed the cocoa beans on 3 different sides. This was actually pretty useful because I wanted to make my farming area more efficient. I already had sugarcane and pumpkins, and now I was adding cocoa beans to the farming area as well. Slowly, my base was becoming more than just a place where I stored my items. It was starting to become an actual production area. I had different crops growing, I had resources stored away, and I was beginning to think more about how I could turn all of this into money. And that's one of the biggest things I want to focus on in this series. I don't just want to build a nice base. I want to build a base that can actually help me become rich on Smite SMP. Every farm I build can potentially give me another way to make money. And the more resources I can produce, the easier it should become to upgrade my base and buy better items. After working on the cocoa beans for a while, though, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next. So I stayed inside my base for a little while. I was basically just standing there thinking about what my next move should be. Sometimes when you're playing Minecraft, you have a huge list of things you want to do, and other times you just stand in your base wondering what to do next. And honestly, that's exactly what happened here. After staying at home for a little while, I finally decided that I should just go exploring again. I wanted to find some more resources and maybe discover something interesting. So I decided to use RTP once again. If you watched episode 1, you already know that RTP can be pretty unpredictable for me. Sometimes it sends me somewhere useful. Sometimes it sends me somewhere completely random. And sometimes it sends me into another dimension when I definitely wasn't expecting it. So I used RTP again and waited to see where I would end up this time. Luckily, I wasn't immediately thrown into the Nether or the end. I ended up in an area where slimes could spawn. This actually caught my attention because slime can be a very useful resource in Minecraft. Slime balls can be used for different crafting recipes, especially if I want to build more advanced farms and redstone machines later. So I started exploring the area. While I was walking around, I also encountered some zombies. They were in my way, so I decided to take them out. I fought the first zombie and defeated it. Then I encountered another one and defeated that one as well. So now I had taken down 2 zombies while exploring. But then I noticed something else. There was a slime nearby. I went toward it and decided to fight it too. After attacking the slime, I managed to kill it. And that gave me another useful resource for my collection. At this point, I was starting to think about what I could build with everything I was collecting. And this is where the episode starts getting interesting. Because my goal isn't just to randomly collect items. I want every resource I collect to eventually have a purpose. Whether that's building my base, creating farms, selling items, or preparing for something bigger later in the series. And if you enjoyed episode 1 and you're still watching episode 2, I seriously appreciate it. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It only takes a few seconds, but it helps me a lot. Every subscriber makes me want to continue the series and make the next episode even better. So if you want to see what happens next on Smite SMP, make sure you subscribe and stay around for the rest of the series. And with that said, I continued exploring, looking for more resources and trying to figure out what my next big project should be. This was only the beginning of episode 2, and I already had a few ideas in my head. The farms were growing, my base was improving, and I was slowly figuring out how to make more money. But I still had a lot more to do, and I had no idea what I was going to find next. After finding the slime and dealing with the zombies, I decided to continue searching around the area. I wanted to see if I could find anything useful or maybe something unexpected. I kept walking around and looking for more resources. But there was one problem. I started walking, and walking, and walking, and honestly, there wasn't really anything happening. So instead of making you watch me walk around for what felt like forever, I decided to cut that entire boring section out of the video. You're welcome. Face with tears of joy. Nobody wants to watch me walk around for 5 minutes doing absolutely nothing. So after cutting that part out, I continued my search. And then I found something that immediately caught my attention. I saw a portal nearby. At first, I thought there might be something interesting around it. But then I noticed there was a huge hole in the ground. And because the hole was so big and looked like it could lead somewhere, I started thinking that maybe this wasn't just a normal cave. I thought there could possibly be a base down there. So obviously, I had to investigate. I started going down into the hole, and I kept going deeper, and deeper, and deeper. The cave was actually much bigger than I expected. At this point, I was thinking that maybe I had finally discovered something interesting. Maybe there was a hidden base. Maybe there was some amazing loot. Maybe I had accidentally found something that another player had built. But after going all the way down and looking around, it turned out to be just a normal cave. Loudly crying face. Yep. All that excitement, all that exploring, and all that going deeper into the hole. And it was literally just a normal Minecraft cave. So unfortunately, there was no secret base waiting for me down there. But that's how exploring Minecraft works sometimes. You can spend a lot of time going somewhere because you think you've discovered something amazing, only to find out that there's absolutely nothing special there. Still, I decided to look around for a little bit before leaving. After that, I checked my inventory and realized I had some items that I didn't really need anymore. My inventory was starting to fill up with random stuff, so I decided to clean it up a little bit. I threw out some of the useless items that I didn't need. This also gave me more space for resources that might actually be useful later. After finishing my little exploration, I decided it was time to head back home. I had already spent enough time searching around, and I didn't want to keep wandering around for no reason. So I used RTP again and teleported back toward my home. After all of that exploring, I finally made my way back home. And when I arrived at my base, I stopped for a moment and looked at everything I had built so far. And honestly, I realized something. My base was really small. Like, really, really small. Face with tears of joy. After everything I had done in episode 1, I was still basically living in a tiny starter base. I had my farms, my storage, my resources, and everything I needed to survive. But it didn't really feel like a proper Smite SMP base yet. So I decided that it was time to make some changes. I wanted to expand the area around my base and make room for more farms. So I started by destroying part of the area behind my base. I know it might look a little strange destroying part of the base after spending time building it. But sometimes you have to destroy something small to build something much better. My plan was to use this new space for another farm. I wanted to build a cherry farm and also make better use of the cocoa beans I had collected earlier. So I started clearing the area behind my base. And let me tell you, this took a long time. Seriously, I was breaking blocks, then breaking more blocks, then placing blocks, then breaking some of those blocks again because I realized I had put them in the wrong place. You know how Minecraft building goes. Faced with tears of joy. At first I thought I could just show the entire process. But when I looked at how long the recording was becoming, I immediately realized that nobody wanted to watch me place blocks for the next 20 minutes. So I decided to speed up this section. And even after speeding it up, it was still pretty long. So instead of making you sit there watching me slowly build the entire farm, I kept the important parts and sped through the boring parts. This way, we can get to the interesting stuff much faster. While working on the area, I started placing the cocoa beans around the jungle logs. I wanted to make the farm more organized and use the available space as efficiently as possible. And now that I had more room behind my base, I could start thinking about how all of these farms could work together. I already had sugarcane. I had pumpkins. I had cocoa beans. And now I was working on adding even more crops and resources to my base. My little starter base was slowly turning into an actual farming area. And the main reason I was doing all of this was simple. Money. I wanted to make as much money as possible on Smite SMP. The more farms I had, the more items I could produce. And the more items I could produce, the more I could potentially sell. So even though building these farms took a lot of time, I knew it would hopefully be worth it later. I continued working on the area and making adjustments until I was finally starting to get somewhere. And then, something completely different happened. While I was working around my base, I found diamonds. Gemstone. I wasn't even expecting to find them. I was focused on building and improving my base, and suddenly I came across diamonds. And obviously, when you see diamonds in Minecraft, you don't just walk past them. I immediately stopped what I was doing and went over to collect them. Finding diamonds while you're actually looking for them is already exciting. But finding them when you're doing something completely different is even better. It felt like Minecraft was basically giving me a little reward for all the work I had been putting into my base. And now I had another useful resource to add to my collection. These diamonds could be useful later for tools, armor, or even other important things I might need for my future projects. After finishing that part of my base, I finally had a little bit more space to work with. And now it was time to actually start putting the farms together. I started by placing the cherry beans and the cocoa beans around the new area. But there was one problem. I couldn't just place everything randomly. Especially with the cocoa beans, I needed to find the right places to put them so that I could actually use the space properly. So I started looking around the area and thinking about where everything should go. I moved around a little bit, checked different spots, and tried to make sure the cocoa beans would fit nicely with the rest of my farm. I wanted the area to be useful, but I also wanted it to look somewhat organized. After spending some time figuring it out, I finally found a place that worked. So I started placing the cocoa beans there. Little by little, the farming area was starting to come together. Then I moved on to the cherry beans. I started placing those as well, trying to make the new area bigger and more productive. At first, everything seemed to be going pretty well. But then I realized something I probably should have thought about earlier. I needed way more dirt. I had started building the farm, but I simply didn't have enough dirt to finish everything the way I wanted. So I had to stop building for a moment and go get more. I left my base and started looking for dirt. And this is another one of those Minecraft moments where you realize that even the simplest resources can suddenly become really important. When you're starting out, you might think dirt is completely useless. But when you start building farms and expanding your base, suddenly you're thinking, why didn't I collect more dirt earlier? Faced with tears of joy. I needed enough dirt to extend the farming area and give myself more room to place everything properly. So I started collecting the dirt I needed. I kept gathering it until I finally had enough for the next stage of the build. Once I had collected enough, I headed back toward my base. I was ready to continue working on the farm. And honestly, even though this part of the build wasn't the most exciting thing ever, I knew it was going to be useful later. My goal was to slowly turn this small starter base into something much bigger. Every little farm I added was another step toward that goal. The cocoa beans could eventually be harvested and sold. The cherry beans could become another source of income. And the more space I had, the more farms I could potentially add later. So I wasn't just collecting dirt for no reason. I was preparing the foundation for my future base. After finally getting back home with the dirt, I looked at the area again. Now I had the resources I needed to continue. The space was slowly starting to look different from how it did when I first came back. What used to just be an empty area behind my base was now becoming a proper farming section. And this was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to have different farms around my base instead of having everything scattered around the world. That way, whenever I came back home, I could quickly check my crops, collect everything, and then sell it or use it for whatever I needed. I still had a lot of work ahead of me, but at least I had finally figured out where I wanted everything to go. And now that I had enough dirt, I could continue expanding the area. The base was still far from finished. But every time I added something new, it started looking a little bit better. And honestly, that's what I like about building in Minecraft. You don't have to finish everything in one day. You can start with something tiny and slowly turn it into something huge. That's exactly what I wanted to do with this base. I wanted to look back at this episode later in the series and be able to see how much everything had changed. Right now, it might just look like a small farming area with some cocoa beans and cherry beans. But hopefully, later on, this entire place will be completely transformed. And with the extra dirt now back at my base, I was ready to continue building. The farm wasn't finished yet. My base wasn't finished yet. And I definitely wasn't finished with Smite SMP. There was still a lot more I wanted to build, more money I wanted to make, and a lot more things I wanted to discover. So I placed the dirt down and got ready to continue with the next part of the build. And this was just another step toward turning my tiny starter base into something much bigger. After all that work, I finally finished everything I wanted to do with my base. The farming area was looking much better, the cocoa beans were placed, the cherry beans were there, and I had finally managed to make some progress with my little starter base. But then I had a problem. I didn't really know what to do next. I looked around my base and started thinking. I had already spent so much time building and improving everything, but now I was just standing there wondering what my next move should be. And honestly, sometimes that's just how Minecraft goes. You can have a whole list of things you want to accomplish, and then suddenly you finish everything and you're like, okay, what now? Faced with tears of joy. So I started thinking about what I could do next on the server. I knew there were probably other players somewhere around me, and I started getting curious about whether there were any bases nearby. But before I started exploring again, I decided that I should prepare myself a little bit. So I went ahead and bought 3 stacks of healing items. I wanted to make sure I had enough to survive if something unexpected happened. Because after everything that happened to me in episode 1, I already knew that Smite SMP could become dangerous very quickly. I didn't want to go exploring with an empty inventory and then suddenly find myself in a situation where I couldn't escape. So after getting my healing items, I started preparing for my next little adventure. I also crafted some ladders. And you might be wondering, why are you making ladders? Well, I had an idea. I wanted to climb up high and look around the area. My goal was to see if I could spot any other player bases nearby. Maybe there was another player living somewhere close to me. Maybe there was a huge base hidden somewhere in the distance. Or maybe I would find absolutely nothing. But I wanted to take a look anyway. So I started climbing up and looking around. I was searching the area and trying to see if I could spot anything interesting. But while I was doing this, things suddenly became a little dangerous. At one point, I was actually getting really close to dying. I wasn't expecting it at all. For a moment, I thought, yeah, this might actually be the end. Skull. But somehow, I survived. I didn't die. And honestly, after everything I've been through on this server, I'm starting to think I have some kind of luck. Or maybe I'm just getting better at surviving. Either way, I was still alive. And after surviving that little situation, I went back toward my base. But then I noticed something that made me remember why I had built these farms in the first place. Some of my cocoa beans had grown. And not only the cocoa beans. Some of my cherry beans had grown as well. This was actually really nice to see because it meant that all the work I had been putting into the farms was finally starting to pay off. I went over to the farming area and started harvesting the grown crops. And instead of just leaving the empty spots there, I replanted them. I wanted to make the farms bigger and keep the production going. So I replaced the cherry beans with even more of them. Then I did the same thing with the cocoa beans. Slowly, the farming area was becoming more productive. And that was a really good way to end the episode. I started episode 2 with a tiny base and not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do. Then I expanded my base, worked on my farming area, added cocoa beans and cherry beans, collected resources, found diamonds, and started preparing for future projects. And now the farms were already starting to grow. This might not seem like a massive achievement yet, but this is only episode 2. I'm planning to keep upgrading everything as the series continues. And hopefully, when we get further into the series, we'll be able to look back at this tiny little base and see just how much it has changed. So everyone, this is the end of episode 2. I really hope you enjoyed watching this episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me a lot and motivates me to keep making more Smite SMP videos. And if you have any ideas for what I should do in episode 3, let me know in the comments. There are still so many things I want to do on this server, and I can't wait to see where this series goes. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you guys in episode 3. Bye. Waving hand fire.